the silent flight. The cabin lights had just dimmed, and the gentle hum of the aircraft engines filled the space with a steady rhythm. Passengers were settling into their seats, some closing their eyes for rest, while others flipped through magazines or watched the tiny screens in front of them. Sundar Pichai sat quietly near the window, his mother Lakshmi Pichai beside him. The flight was long, and both of them knew it would test their patience and their strength. From the outside, it looked like just another journey. But for Sundar, it carried a weight he could not put into words. He had always been the calm one, the one who faced challenges with quiet strength. But now, sitting beside his aging mother, he felt a tenderness he could not hide. Lakshmi had not been feeling well for weeks, and though the doctors had allowed her to travel, Sundar kept checking on her with every small movement she made. Lakshmi leaned her head against the seat, her face pale yet graceful. She had been the strongest pillar in Sundar's life, guiding him through the years when dreams seemed too far away. She had taught him humility, reminding him again and again that no matter how high a person rises, kindness must always remain the foundation. Sundar looked at her and thought about those lessons. He knew that without her, he would not be the man he had become. As the plane climbed higher into the dark sky, a small turbulence shook the cabin. It was not strong, but enough to cause nervous whispers among the passengers. Sundar immediately reached for his mother's hand. His touch was gentle but firm, a silent reminder that she was safe. Lakshmi opened her eyes and gave a faint smile. "Do not worry, Beta," she whispered softly. "The sky has always tested us. We just have to hold on." Her words carried more than comfort. They carried memory, history, and the countless struggles she had faced to raise her children. Sundar felt his throat tighten. He wanted to speak, but the words seemed too heavy. Instead, he held her hand a little tighter. The flight attendants moved through the aisle, offering water and checking seatbelts. Sundar noticed the subtle glances from nearby passengers. Some had recognized him, the CEO of one of the biggest technology companies in the world. But in this moment, he was not a leader, not an executive, not a global figure. He was only a son, quietly caring for his mother. Then came an unexpected moment. A passenger across the aisle, a middle-aged man, seemed impatient. He muttered something under his breath, complaining about how Sundar was leaning closer to his mother and slightly taking more armrest space. It was a small thing, but the tone was sharp, filled with irritation. Sundar heard it. Lakshmi did too. There was silence for a few seconds, as if the air itself was waiting to see how Sundar would respond. Instead of reacting with anger or defensiveness, Sundar turned to the man with calm eyes. His voice was soft, almost quiet, but it carried weight. "I am sorry if I disturbed you," he said. "She is not well. I just wanted to make sure she is comfortable." The man's face changed. His impatience melted into guilt. He looked at Lakshmi, her frail hand in her son's, and suddenly his own irritation seemed small, almost shameful. He lowered his head and whispered, "I understand. I am sorry." The silence that followed was deep. It was not the silence of awkwardness, but of realization. The passengers nearby felt it too. In a single moment, without raising his voice, Sundar had shown a truth greater than any speech. Humility has power, and kindness has strength. Lakshmi looked at her son, pride shining in her tired eyes. "You did not raise your voice," she whispered. "You raised your respect." Sundar smiled faintly, though his heart was heavy. He thought about how often the world demanded loudness, but his mother had taught him that true dignity was found in quietness. As the hours passed, the flight grew calmer. The turbulence faded, but inside Sundar's heart, a storm of thoughts continued. He wondered how much more time he had with her, how many more journeys they could take together. The thought made his chest ache, but he did not let it show. Instead, he adjusted the blanket over her shoulders, making sure she was warm. At that moment, another twist arrived. The pilot's voice came through the speakers, announcing that due to weather issues, the flight would face delays and possibly a diversion. Passengers sighed in frustration. Sundar closed his eyes, realizing this would be even harder for his mother. He leaned close and whispered, "It may take longer, Amma, but I am here. I will not let go of your hand." Lakshmi's eyes softened, and with her fading strength she replied, That is all I need, my son. Your hand." The world outside the plane was stormy, but inside that row of seats, there was a stillness. A son and a mother, bound by love, respect, and the gentle strength that silence carries. The other passengers who had witnessed the earlier exchange now looked at Sundar differently. No one whispered, no one complained. Instead, the cabin carried an unspoken calm, as if everyone had been reminded of something they had forgotten. Kindness has the power to silence even the loudest restlessness, and so the flight continued, each passing minute carrying with it more than just distance. It carried the silent weight of love, the quiet force of humility, and the unshaken bond between a son and his mother. When the silence broke, the storm outside the plane grew louder. Every few minutes, the cabin lights flickered faintly as the aircraft moved through heavy clouds. The sound of rain tapping against the windows echoed softly, reminding everyone of the uncertainty beyond the metal walls that carried them. The pilot's voice had warned about delays, but now the turbulence was stronger. Passengers shifted nervously in their seats, some closing their eyes in silent prayers. Sundar sat steady, his hand still wrapped around his mother's fragile fingers. Lakshmi's eyes were closed, her breathing slow but uneven. He studied her face carefully, every wrinkle carrying a story, every sigh reminding him that her strength was not infinite. He remembered her long walks to the market in their small town, carrying heavy bags but never complaining. He remembered her waiting for him at the railway station during his student days, holding a tiffin box with food because she worried he would not have eaten enough. Those memories now felt like treasures carved deep into his heart. Suddenly, a loud crack of thunder outside made the cabin shudder. A child in the back row burst into tears. The sound spread through the cabin like a wave, making the tension sharper. Sundar gently turned to his mother, whispering, "Are you all right, Amma?" Lakshmi opened her eyes slowly, her voice weak but calm. "Yes, Beta, I am fine. But the little one is not." Sundar looked back at the crying child, a young boy clutching his seatbelt while his mother tried to soothe him. The boy's sobs grew louder as the plane shook again. Sundar felt something stir inside him. He knew fear like that. He had once been that child, holding his mother's hand during a train ride when the wheels screeched loudly in the night. Without hesitation, Sundar unbuckled his belt for a moment and leaned across the aisle. His voice was soft, steady, and reassuring. "It is all right," he said gently to the boy. "The sky is only testing us. It will pass." The boy looked up at him, eyes wet, searching for trust. Sundar smiled faintly and reached out his hand, showing calmness. "You are safe here. Just close your eyes and think of something that makes you happy." The boy's sobs slowly softened. His mother gave Sundar a grateful nod, her lips trembling with relief. Lakshmi watched all of this silently, her eyes glistening. She whispered to herself, "You are still my boy, but now you carry others too." For a while, the cabin became quieter. The storm outside still raged, but inside people felt a shift. It was not the absence of fear, it was the presence of calmness, borrowed from one man's gentle words and steady heart. But then another problem arose. The overhead lights blinked, and the plane suddenly dipped. Gasps filled the cabin. Trays rattled, water spilled, and hearts raced. The pilot's voice came back, explaining that the turbulence was heavier than expected, but assuring everyone that the aircraft was secure. Yet reassurance from the speaker was not the same as reassurance from the heart. Lakshmi leaned forward slightly, whispering, "Sundar, do you remember when you were small and we crossed the flooded river?" Sundar nodded faintly. "Yes, Amma. I was afraid. But you carried me on your back." Lakshmi smiled weakly. "And I told you then, when the water is rough, we must trust the steps we take. That lesson has not changed." Her words sank deep into him. He realized that even now, even in her weakness, she was still teaching him. He placed his other hand over hers, holding on as if anchoring them both. Minutes stretched slowly, each second heavy with uncertainty. Sundar closed his eyes, silently praying not for himself but for her. He prayed she would have the strength to endure this flight, that the storm would not take more from her fragile body. A sudden calm came after the turbulence. The shaking stopped, and the rain against the windows softened. Passengers sighed in relief, some even clapping lightly as if victory had been achieved. Sundar opened his eyes and looked at his mother. She seemed tired, yet her smile had returned. But just as the relief settled, something unexpected happened. Lakshmi's breathing grew shallow. Her chest rose unevenly, her lips pale. Sundar felt his heart drop. "Amma?" he whispered, his voice trembling now. She looked at him, her eyes heavy but full of love. "I am all right, Beta. Do not be afraid." But Sundar could feel it. Something was not right. He quickly called for the flight attendant, his calm breaking into urgency. Passengers turned their heads, sensing the shift in the air. The same man who had earlier complained about Sundar now leaned forward, concern on his face. The child who had cried earlier now sat silently, watching. The cabin once again fell into a hush, but this time it was not fear of the storm outside. It was fear for the gentle woman inside. The flight attendant rushed over, asking if Lakshmi needed medical attention. Sundar's voice cracked slightly, but he stayed composed. "Yes, please. She is having trouble breathing." In that moment, all the silence that had felt calm now became heavy with worry. The storm outside had passed, but a storm within had begun, one that could not be escaped by reaching a new destination. Sundar held her hand tightly, whispering with tears gathering in his eyes, "I am here, Amma. I will not let go, no matter what happens." And the entire cabin, filled with strangers from different places and different lives, sat still, watching the quiet battle of a son's love against time. The fragile breath. The cabin was still, every sound muted except for the soft beeping of the small medical device that the flight attendants had quickly brought forward. Lakshmi's breathing was shallow, her lips pale, and her eyelids heavy. Sundar sat frozen for a moment, his hand gripping hers tightly as if his strength could somehow keep her steady. He had faced boardrooms filled with powerful voices. He had stood under the weight of global responsibility, but nothing had ever made his heart pound like the sight of his mother struggling to take a breath. The flight attendant spoke softly. "Sir, is she on any medication?" Sundar nodded quickly, reaching into the small travel bag beneath his seat. His hands shook as he searched, pulling out the small pouch where Lakshmi's medicines were kept. The passengers nearby watched silently, some whispering quiet prayers under their breath. The same man who had earlier complained leaned closer now, offering his bottle of water. His voice, once sharp, was gentle. "Maybe this will help." Sundar looked at him and gave a nod of thanks. It was strange how quickly people could change when faced with another person's pain. Lakshmi opened her eyes for a moment, her gaze soft and steady despite her weakness. She whispered, "Do not worry, Beta. I am still here." Sundar felt tears sting his eyes, but he blinked them back. He had to be strong because she was still trying to be strong for him. Minutes stretched painfully. The turbulence outside had calmed, but the storm in Sundar's heart raged louder than ever. He kept whispering her name, trying to anchor her, trying to remind her that he was beside her. Suddenly, a voice came from the back of the plane. "I am a doctor," a woman said, rising from her seat. She quickly moved forward, her face calm but her steps urgent. The flight attendants made space for her, and she knelt beside Lakshmi. She checked her pulse, her breathing, and then looked up at Sundar. "She is weak," the doctor said, "but her pulse is still steady. She needs oxygen. Luckily, the plane is equipped." The attendants rushed to bring a small oxygen mask, carefully placing it over Lakshmi's face. Sundar held her hand tighter, whispering softly as the mask covered her mouth and nose. "Just breathe, Amma, slowly. I am here." The cabin seemed to breathe with her. Every rise of her chest brought relief. Every pause brought fear. Passengers leaned back but kept glancing forward, unable to escape the weight of the moment. The little boy who had earlier cried tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mama, she will be okay, right?" His mother nodded softly, though her own eyes were uncertain. As the doctor worked calmly, Sundar sat there remembering. He remembered nights when he was sick as a child and Lakshmi stayed awake, pressing a damp cloth to his forehead, whispering the same words he now whispered to her. He remembered her sitting by the dim light of a lantern, sewing his school uniform because they could not afford to buy new ones. He remembered the way she never complained, never asked for anything. and how she always gave more than she had. And now here she was, fragile, yet still teaching him about resilience. After some minutes, her breathing steadied. The oxygen mask seemed to help. The doctor smiled faintly, placing a reassuring hand on Sundar's shoulder. She is stable for now. Keep her calm. When you land, make sure she is seen by a hospital. Relief washed over Sundar like a tide, but it was mixed with fear. He knew this was only a pause, not an ending. He knew her strength was not endless. Lakshmi opened her eyes again, her gaze locking onto Sundar's. She slowly removed the mask for just a moment, whispering faintly, "See, I told you. The storm always passes." Her words broke something inside him. He nodded, unable to speak, tears slipping quietly down his face. He quickly helped her put the mask back on, his fingers trembling. The passengers around them sat in deep silence. No one was restless anymore. No one complained about delays or turbulence. It was as if the entire cabin had united in one shared heartbeat. All eyes fixed on the fragile woman who had turned a flight into a lesson in love. Humility and resilience. Sundar leaned closer and whispered, "Rest now, Amma. We still have distance to cover, but I will carry every step with you." Lakshmi closed her eyes, her breathing steadier, her face calm. Sundar sat beside her, staring out of the small window into the endless dark sky. He realized that in life, storms would always come. Delays would always test patience, but the real test was how much strength one could give to those they loved. And in that quiet cabin, he knew this flight was not just about reaching a destination. It was about holding on, about learning that sometimes the greatest journeys happen in silence, when the heart is tested most. The unexpected test hours had passed in the sky, yet Sundar felt as if time had slowed down inside that cabin. Every minute beside his mother was heavy with both fear and gratitude. Lakshmi was resting with the oxygen mask gently covering her face, her chest rising and falling in a fragile rhythm. Sundar stayed awake, his eyes never leaving her, as if his watchfulness alone could protect her from the unseen dangers that lingered in silence. The passengers around had grown quieter. Even those who had earlier shifted impatiently now seemed respectful, careful not to disturb the stillness. The boy who had once cried was now asleep against his mother's shoulder, while the man who had once complained sat upright, his eyes soft, glancing at Sundar and Lakshmi every now and then as though silently guarding them too. The hum of the engines carried a strange calm, but beneath it, Sundar's heart beat unevenly. He thought about everything his mother had given up in her life. She had never owned anything expensive, never demanded comfort for herself, never once spoke about what she missed. Yet she had poured every ounce of her strength into her children, shaping their futures with her hands and her heart. Sundar felt a deep ache inside as he realized that no achievement of his could ever repay what she had given him. But peace was never meant to last long that night. The pilot's voice returned, firm yet calm, announcing that due to worsening weather conditions, the flight could not land at its planned destination. They would need to be diverted to another city, 1 hour away. Murmurs filled the cabin. Passengers sighed, some worried about missed connections, others about family waiting at the airport. For Sundar, the words struck deeper. He knew his mother needed medical attention as soon as possible. Every extra hour in the air felt like another risk. He raised his hand and called for the flight attendant, his voice steady but urgent. "Please, how long will it take to land?" The attendant replied gently, "Sir, approximately 2 more hours. 2 hours." Sundar felt his stomach tighten. He looked at his mother, who stirred faintly at his voice. He leaned close and whispered, "Amma, we have to wait a little longer, but I will not leave your side." Lakshmi opened her eyes, her voice weak but filled with grace. 2 hours. Beta, we have waited for years for so many things in life. We can wait for 2 more hours. Her strength amazed him. Here she was, frail and tired, yet her spirit stood taller than the storm itself. Sundar nodded, forcing a small smile, though inside his heart trembled. The doctor who had earlier stepped forward now approached Sundar quietly. She whispered, "I will keep checking on her. Stay calm. She is still holding steady." Sundar placed his hand over his chest and bowed his head in gratitude. As the flight dragged on, the cabin seemed to share in Sundar's vigil. Strangers who had never met before now felt connected by a single story unfolding before their eyes. It was no longer just a flight across the skies. It was a flight that carried lessons of love, patience, and the fragility of life. But then, another unexpected twist appeared. The plane shook once more as it entered another pocket of turbulence. A few gasps escaped, but Sundar's attention was not on the shaking. Lakshmi coughed weakly beneath the mask, her chest straining. Sundar quickly leaned forward, adjusting the mask and holding her hand firmly. "Breathe slowly, Amma. I am here." His voice cracked with emotion. Lakshmi's eyes glistened, and for a brief moment she lifted the mask slightly to whisper, "Do not cry, Beta. You are stronger than tears." Sundar shook his head, tears already forming. "Strength is not always silence, Amma. Sometimes strength is love." His words carried through the quiet cabin. Though he spoke softly, those nearby could hear. The passengers felt their own throats tighten, realizing that they were not only watching a son care for his mother, but also witnessing love in its purest, most unguarded form. The turbulence eased again, but the tension inside Sundar's heart did not. He could not stop imagining what might happen if they did not land in time. He prayed silently, whispering words his mother had once taught him, words that gave him courage as a boy. Finally, the pilot announced they were beginning descent into the alternate city. Relief swept through the cabin, though Sundar knew the journey was not over. He looked at Lakshmi, her hand soft in his. "We are almost there, Amma. Hold on just a little longer." Her lips curved faintly into a smile. "I am holding on, my son, because you are holding me." The plane descended, the lights of the city glowing faintly through the window. To the passengers, it meant landing, but to Sundar, it meant hope, a chance to fight for his mother again on the ground. The storm outside had forced a diversion, but Sundar knew that sometimes life did the same. It pushed people off their expected paths, tested their strength, and reminded them of what truly mattered. As the wheels prepared to touch the runway, the cabin was silent, every heart waiting, every eye watching, all drawn together by the quiet strength of a son's love and a mother's resilience. The race against time. The plane touched down with a rough jolt, the wheels scraping against the runway as the engines roared. Passengers sighed in relief, some clapping lightly, but for Sundar there was no celebration. His eyes were only on his mother. Lakshmi's breathing was steady but weak, her frail body trembling under the thin airline blanket. The pilot announced that medical staff had been alerted on the ground, and the crew asked passengers to remain seated so assistance could reach row 17 quickly. For once, no one protested. People who had earlier complained about delays now stayed silent, their eyes following every movement as if they were part of this unfolding story. The doctor who had helped earlier leaned close to Sundar and said softly, "She must be moved carefully. We will make sure she is taken straight to the hospital." Sundar nodded, his heart heavy yet hopeful. As the doors of the plane opened, the cool night air rushed inside. 2 paramedics stepped in with calm urgency, carrying equipment and a stretcher. Sundar gently whispered to his mother, "Amma, help has come. Just a little more strength." Lakshmi's eyes opened faintly, and she gave him the same small smile she always gave when she wanted to reassure him, even in her weakest moments. The paramedics lifted her gently onto the stretcher, securing the oxygen mask. Sundar followed closely, his hand never leaving hers. The entire cabin remained silent, passengers bowing their heads as she was carried through the narrow aisle. Sundar felt the eyes of strangers on him, but he did not feel judged. He felt their quiet prayers. As they stepped off the plane, the night air struck Sundar's face. Flashing ambulance lights lit up the runway. He climbed inside with his mother, gripping her hand tightly as the paramedics began checking her pulse and adjusting the oxygen flow. The vehicle sped through the dark streets toward the nearest hospital. Inside the ambulance, Sundar's thoughts spiraled. He remembered his mother sitting by the clay stove when he was a boy, cooking simple meals with patience. He remembered how she saved money by stitching old clothes so he could buy books for school. He remembered her words when he once failed an exam. Marks will rise again, but character must never fall. Every memory cut him and healed him at the same time. Lakshmi stirred weakly, her voice muffled by the mask. "Beta?" Sundar leaned close, his tears threatening to spill. "Yes, Amma. I am here," she whispered. "Promise me something." "Anything, Amma." Her eyes, though tired, glowed with the same strength that had carried her through a lifetime of struggle. "Promise me you will not let success take away your gentleness. Promise me you will always remember that respect and kindness are bigger than any title." Sundar's throat tightened. He nodded, pressing her hand against his forehead. "I promise, Amma. I promise with all my heart." The ambulance reached the hospital, its siren cutting through the quiet night. Nurses and doctors rushed to receive Lakshmi, wheeling her through bright corridors filled with the smell of antiseptic and urgency. Sundar walked beside the stretcher, his steps fast but his face calm, refusing to let fear win. In the emergency ward, machines beeped as doctors worked quickly, checking her heartbeat, her lungs, her oxygen. Sundar stood at the corner, his fists clenched, feeling both helpless and determined. He wanted to fight for her, yet all he could do was wait. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, a doctor came out and said, "She is stable for now. We will admit her for observation and further tests. You can see her soon." Sundar closed his eyes, whispering a silent prayer of thanks. Relief flooded him, but it was a fragile relief, like standing on the edge of a cliff and holding on by a rope. When he was finally allowed to enter her room, he saw her lying on the bed, tubes gently connected, her face pale but peaceful. He walked forward slowly, sat beside her, and held her hand again. "Amma, you are safe now. You fought so bravely." She looked at him faintly, her lips moving beneath the mask. "I was never alone. You were with me." Sundar lowered his head, tears streaming freely now. "And I will always be with you, Amma. Always." Outside the room, the city lights glowed against the night sky. People moved in the streets, unaware of the storm that had passed through this one family's journey. But inside that hospital room there was silence, deep, powerful silence. A silence filled with love, resilience, and a bond that could not be broken by fear or distance. Sundar sat there, still holding her hand, realizing that sometimes life gave people storms not to break them, but to remind them of the strength they carried and the love that defined them. The truth in the silence. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitor beside Lakshmi's bed. Sundar sat close, his hand wrapped around hers as if letting go would mean losing her to the silence. The night outside stretched endlessly, the faint glow of streetlights spilling in through the curtains. A nurse entered softly, checking the drip and noting the readings. She gave Sundar a gentle nod before leaving, but her silence felt heavier than words. Sundar looked at his mother's face, pale, fragile, yet still carrying the calmness of someone who had endured more than most. After some time, the doctor entered. He was calm but serious, carrying a folder in his hand. Sundar stood immediately, his heart pounding as if it already knew the weight of the words about to come. "Mr. Pichai," the doctor said softly, "your mother is stable now, but there are signs of a deeper issue. Her lungs are weak and her heart is under strain. The flight stress revealed what was already there. She will need close monitoring and treatment. We will run more tests, but you must prepare yourself. Her condition is fragile." The words hit Sundar like heavy stones. He nodded, but his chest ached. "Please do everything you can. She has always been my strength. I cannot lose her." The doctor placed a hand on his shoulder, offering both comfort and honesty. "We will do our best. But sometimes, strength is not about fighting forever. It is about accepting and cherishing every moment we are given." When the doctor left, Sundar returned to her bedside, his emotions pressing against him like waves. Lakshmi's eyes fluttered open. Though her voice was faint, it carried clarity. "Beta, what did they say?" Sundar swallowed hard, struggling to speak. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from the truth. But he remembered her lessons, honesty and courage. He leaned closer, whispering gently, "They say you need rest, Amma. They say your heart is tired." Lakshmi gave a soft smile, as if she had already known. "Hearts grow tired, Sundar. That is the way of life. But love never grows tired. Love is the one thing that grows stronger." even when the body does not." Her words sank deep into him. He lowered his head, pressing her hand against his forehead. "Amma, I am not ready. I still need you. I still need your strength." She brushed his hand softly, her touch weak yet filled with warmth. "You have my strength, Beta. It is inside you. I only carried it for you until you were ready. Now it is yours to carry for others." Her words broke him, but they also built him. He realized she was not only his mother, she was his guide, his foundation, and the reason he had learned the value of humility in a world of power. Hours passed. Sundar stayed beside her, whispering stories from his childhood, reminding her of days when life was simple, but full of love. Sometimes she smiled faintly, other times her eyes closed, her breathing slow but steady. Then, in the stillness of the night, something unexpected happened. The man from the plane, the one who had once complained, appeared at the hospital door. He stepped inside quietly, holding a small bouquet of flowers. Sundar looked at him, surprised. The man spoke softly, his voice filled with regret and sincerity. "I came to say, I am sorry. I was impatient on the flight. I did not see what was before me. But your patience, your kindness, it changed something in me. I wanted to thank your mother, because she raised a son who showed me humility when I needed it most." Sundar's eyes softened. He accepted the flowers, placing them on the small table beside Lakshmi's bed. "Thank you," he whispered. "She will be glad to know her lessons reach others too." Lakshmi stirred faintly, opening her eyes. She saw the flowers and the man standing there, his head bowed. With a weak smile, she whispered, "The sky tested us, but it also brought kindness." The man's eyes grew moist, and he bowed his head deeper. That night, Sundar realized something profound. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and storms came without warning. But even in storms, kindness could ripple outward, touching hearts that seemed unreachable. As he sat beside his mother, he knew this was no longer just his journey. It was a lesson for everyone who had witnessed it, on the flight, and now, beyond. The gentle dawn. The first rays of dawn filtered through the hospital window, painting the white walls with a soft golden glow. Sundar had not closed his eyes through the night. He sat by his mother's bed, his hand still wrapped around hers, feeling every faint pulse as if it carried the meaning of his entire existence. The doctor entered quietly in the early morning, checking the readings and adjusting the tubes. "She made it through the night," he said softly. "She is weak but stable. These next days will matter the most." Sundar nodded, his eyes red but steady. He had made a silent promise. He would not leave her side, no matter how long the road ahead. Lakshmi's eyes fluttered open slowly, her gaze meeting her son's tired face. She smiled faintly. "You did not sleep?" Sundar shook his head gently. "How can I sleep when you are fighting? I want to be here for every breath you take, Amma." Her hand moved weakly, brushing his cheek. "You always were here, even when life pulled you far away. I always felt you beside me." Her words brought tears to Sundar's eyes. He leaned forward, his voice trembling but filled with love. "Amma, everything I have achieved, everything people respect me for, it is because of you. Your sacrifices, your lessons, your strength. You gave me everything, and I can never repay it." Lakshmi's smile deepened, though her eyes were wet. "You repaid me long ago, Beta. Every time you treated someone with kindness, every time you stayed humble in success, every time you remembered where you came from, that was my reward. I do not need anything more." Silence filled the room, but it was not heavy. It was a silence of truth, of love too deep for words. As the day grew brighter, visitors came. The doctor who had helped on the flight stepped in to check on her. The man who had once complained returned again, this time with his wife, both of them bringing homemade food as a gesture of respect. Even the young boy from the flight had drawn a small picture, given through his mother, showing a plane in the sky with two people holding hands inside it. Sundar looked at the drawing, his heart swelling, realizing how one flight had touched so many lives. Later that evening, Sundar sat by her again, the flowers from the visitors filling the room with color. Lakshmi's voice was soft, but her words carried weight. "Beta, listen to me. Life will test you again and again. Storms will come when you least expect them, but do not fear them. Storms are not always meant to destroy. Sometimes they come to remind us of what matters most. Sundar held her hand tighter, whispering, "And what matters most is love." Lakshmi closed her eyes, a peaceful smile on her face. "Yes, love. Love and respect. Remember that always." Tears slipped down Sundar's face, but they were no longer only tears of fear. They were tears of gratitude, of understanding. He realized this journey had changed him too. It had stripped away every title, every achievement, leaving only the pure truth. He was a son and she was his mother, and that bond was the greatest honor of his life. Days passed, and Lakshmi slowly regained strength under constant care. Sundar stayed with her through every step, carrying her lessons not just in his mind, but in his heart. He had seen the fragility of life, and he had also seen the strength of humility. One evening, as the sun set outside the hospital window, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, Sundar looked at his mother and whispered, "Amma, when the world looks at me, I want them to see you, because every part of me is built from you." Lakshmi's eyes glistened as she replied, "Then I can leave this world one day with peace, knowing my love will continue through you." The silence that followed was powerful, gentle, unshaken, eternal. And so the journey that began in the stormy sky ended in the quiet of a hospital room, with lessons written not in books but in love, resilience, and humility. Sundar realized the truth his mother had always carried. Storms may test us, but kindness, respect, and gentle strength will always carry us through.